the history of something, all kinds of interesting information appears. So hopefully we can. Now this is where you can help me out. But there was a jail cell in Watrous, right, at one time, in the bottom of the post office building.
Yeah.
Right. So there was.
I've been in there.
Oh.
Not as.
Okay. That's okay. You don't have to explain. Okay. So there was There was a jail cell in Watrous, but there was also a jail cell at Manitou Beach. So before I start that, where it was located, I'd just like to put one little plug in for the walking tour historical map of Manitou Beach. So this is been around for a while, and our Manitou Beach historian Sue Alcock and my husband Gary spent many, many days, hours, weeks, and months on this, doing the research. So this is where everything was located at Manitou Beach up until 1940, about-ish. Right, and it's been invaluable because, you know, there might be a corner of this street and that street, and there might have been 5 different businesses, homes, things on that location. And so this map actually outlines everything that was at sort of every location at the beach pre-1940. And so in this case, it's been valuable to know what was on the corner of where the jail cell came from. So this map we have blown up in the office area, and we refer to it quite a bit.
Are they for sale?
So these are, you can get these here. Yeah, okay. These sort of, you know, personal copies. So, but I just wanted to put that plug in because it has been so helpful in this research. Okay, so onto the door. So this door came to us from Glenn Bartle, and I believe his mom's Donna. Oh, there you go. There you go. Over there. And he had it in his home, right, yeah, for a number of years, and so then decided that maybe this was a better place for it. So yeah, so that's great. So the location of the jail at Manitou Beach was approximately where Salty Surf is. Maybe not right on the corner, but just off the corner there. So right on the corner was a little confectionery called the Sip and Bite, and it was run by Laura Berkey. And then next to the Sip and Bite was a building, and if I can just pull it up here, this is the east side of the beach, and let me find 68. Okay, so the building was first built probably by the Puris Salt Company. And then it was leased to the village in 1926 as a community hall and police station. And I believe there was Manitou Beach equipment was stored in that building. There was a bedroom in that building, and if anybody else knows more about that building, feel free to mention it. So from that Prairie Reflections is a little blurb that's called Beach Policeman. So Manitou Beach once had a police station located west of the Hiawatha Lodge on what is now, 1983 now, Scott Cabin property. It served as the village office and included a jail cell equipped with a cot. Some of the locally hired policemen were J.J. McLaughlin, Bill Cashman, Al Berkey, Roy McLaughlin, and Hugh McLeod. So I'm not sure how long. I know it was in the 30s and the early 40s when that police force was, the summer police force was in force at Manitou Beach. And So I'd just like to also read a tiny blurb about Al Berkey. So do we know who Al Berkey is? Yeah, he had 3 sons, Homer, Bill, and Jack. And so Al Berkey, under his family's bio, says that at some point, I can't put my eyes on it right now, but the gist of it is that during the 30s, his job kind of came to an end and dried up. He was a grain buyer, and so he hired on as a summer policeman and did that for all through the 1930s. Okay, so that Homer Berkey was interviewed with an oral history, and he gave the story of his life. And very late in his life, not too long before he passed away, Sue and I sat with him, and he gave us a little story that he remembered from being in the police station when his dad was a summer constable. So we have that clip, so we're going to play it, and this is Homer telling a story about a little experience. He would have been maybe 4 or 5 years old at the time. So if we can just, can I do this?
Yes.
And you have memories of your dad as a policeman down at Manitou Beach?
Mentioning him, that's a good one. Mentioning him being the policeman, you see. So he was, yeah, oh God, yes. There was one night somebody came down to I should say, you see, the village owned this. Here's our booth, our confectionery here. Then this little patch of backyard where they'd drive in and unload bottles and load up the empties. And then over this little fence, there'd likely be a little alleyway here, narrow, because not too much cars driving around. And then this building where the village owned, where they kept their little kind of hose fire truck, and a couple and an old truck and a couple of other kind of wagons for things, and quite a few tools right there. And in the corner of that building was a bedroom right there. And while my dad was the policeman, the village, you see, gave us that bedroom to sleep in. And then just past the bedroom, there's the cell. There's a heavy door, you know, and 3 bars, I think it was, on a small window, and right in there, that's the cell. If anybody was thrown in the cell, it's right next door to the bedroom. And so anyway, one night, way back in about maybe 1931, some guy come down to we just gone to bed, 12 o'clock, maybe 12:30, and some guy rapped on the door. Hey, policeman in there? Yep. Okay, you're wanted. Down at such and such a place, I forget where it was. Anyway, there's a guy making disturbance down there, and he's plastered. And he's causing trouble. You got to come down and do something about it. So my dad put his jacket on and his hat, and down to that place he went. I don't know whose place it was, because this is a long time ago, see. And here was this guy. I thought he could get away with just about anything. He was doing a little cussing and bossing people around and pushing people around, and he was quite plastered. So my dad just took hold of him and brought his arm up behind his back and marched him out of that building, out to his old car, old Model T, and took him to the police station and marched him right into that cell. Now you go to sleep, see. So this guy, he's pretty mad that he get thrown in jail. That's a terrible thing to happen to the lieutenant governor's son, you know. And he says, you just wait, you're gonna be in trouble, Mr. Policeman. You're gonna be in trouble. Why? Well, he says, when the lieutenant governor hears about this, you're gonna be in trouble. Lieutenant Governor Monroe hears about this. Monroe will hear about this, and he says, you're gonna be in trouble. My dad says, well, I can hardly wait.
Because Monroe actually had a cottage at Manitou Beach,
Yeah.
didn't he? Down at the east end.
Yeah, well, this one was at the west end.
Oh, so we had two
Well,
cottages.
Down close where the tennis court is.
Yes. Sorry, I've got my
Yeah,
east and west
yeah,
mixed
you're-
up. Yeah,
So
down by the
anyway,
tennis courts, you're
He
right.
didn't get to
yes.
sleep in his cottage that night anyway. So anyway, he was pretty ticked off that he got thrown in jail. And so he made him a racket all night until way on, about 4 o'clock anyway. He took his cup, he's supposed to just have a drinking cup in there, you know. He rattled that against the bars on the door, and he says, boy, he says, I sure feel sorry for that wife of yours in that bedroom there to have to put up with this. I apologize to her, but he says, you're sure not going to sleep, Mr. Policeman. And he rattled that cup for about 3 or 4 hours.
So your dad obviously didn't take the cup away.
No, you should have thought of that, eh?
Well, that's before the RCMP.
Yeah.
That's why every watershed had their own policeman then too. The RCMP didn't come into it, well, they were expected not to policing the area.
Yeah. Every town kind of
In fact, our RCMP.
have their own policeman, yeah, have their own policeman.
Yeah, for a while, yeah.
Oh, just say that a little
Butch
louder.
Welver came.
Say that a little louder, Murray. So just say that a little louder, so everybody can hear what you just said.
Well, I'm not sure it's gospel, but it's generally true. The RCMP, at one time, the town of Watrous had its own police force too. And the RCMP, I think, when they went into an agreement with the towns, back in the 40s, because our RCMP presence was from Yonge. That's where the constable was stationed at Yonge when I was really young. And then whenever the town entered into a policing agreement in the 1940s, I'm not sure what year. Butch Welver was the only policeman here. Some of you remember Big Butch. He was about 6'6".
His wife taught me French. Well, I've been going to Xena School taking correspondence in grade 9. But we moved to Watrous at Christmas time, and then I had to take French, and the teacher that was helping me with correspondence was teaching me Latin. So I'd have to get caught up on French.
Beside the jail door there, at the back is Albert's police hat. That's his, we got that from the family. That's normally displayed upstairs. And then there's a photo of him and Homer on the beach there. That's on the door there, so that's Al in his full police uniform and Homer in his bathing suit, I think. So, yeah, so that door has seen a lot of stories, and that's a great one that we heard.
Yeah.
So how many people, what would the population of Manitou be in 1930?
Oh, gosh.
In the summer, it would be very high.
Yeah.
Winter population or summer population?
Two different things. We'll go summer.
Summer, oh, I didn't, you got a few thousand people.
A few thousand.
Yeah, the tourists just flooded in. And there's a story upstairs about how, they all came and then they all left. And so that everything was quiet after the
And it all
September long
happened
weekend.
overnight.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, so,
And then in the winter,
That used to be the best day there was. Everybody
The rest of the time, like outside of summer,
Outside of summer,
They left to go home.
it'd be a couple hundred,
left the beach to us.
175 to 200. Not as many as today. Today's
No.
quite a large population.
I think when I grew up at the beach, like in the 70s, I think there was less than 100 of us that lived
Year-round?
year-round.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with that, because
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
first moved here in 1998, the year-round population was around about 90, by going by
Yeah.
the census.
Yeah,
which
like
was
I'm
how many
thinking
people?
between 70 and 80 maybe.
And now it's way higher.
Yeah. Yeah, because we didn't have full water and sewer
No.
for a while.
Well,
right?
no, there were no services.
Yeah.
The summer water, and they shut off West
Yeah.
Lansing about Thanksgiving time.
Summer water?
Yeah.
It always shut off before the end of September.
Yeah.
Water lines hanging in the trees.
So does anybody have any other information or whatever that they happen to know about the jail door? Go Sue.
Well, this is not particularly the jail door, but it's another Homer Berkey story.
Oh, okay.
And it is tied into the jail.
Okay.
You see, there's a couple of recording seeking Al Capone. And so they interviewed Homer, and he was telling them, the little guy, he was sleeping in the bedroom, but there was a card game going on. And this was a very special card game. So, you know, he was sort of figuring, you know, this was Al Capone in for a card game.
You never know.
You never know.
David got most of it, to tell you the truth.
Well,
Other than that, played it up.
The door, when I bought Scott Cabins, it was in that shed. And when I sold the place to Jerry Barlow, he asked about the door, and I said, sure, he could stay with the shed. But the jail was gone, but the door was still there. So Jerry took the door and ended up it's here.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, we're glad it did.
Can I throw in a little bit more about Pura Salts?
Oh, sure.
They had built the building, but when I was doing research, well, they were actually an Ontario company, and Purus is connected to itchy. It's part of that word structure. And they were in, apparently not for very long, in the salt business at the lake. And I say not for very long, because they leased the building to the village to use, so.
Did they really bottle water?
I don't know, I really couldn't find much about Purus, other than it was an Ontario company.
I didn't know.
The bottling plant was earlier, and dismantled.
That's what I found in this shed too, was one of those bottles.
Oh, okay, what was the bottle look like?
That the bottle I have upstairs?
Yes.
The one I found was tough to do.
Yeah, this Manitou Mineral Water Company Limited, Watrous, spelled spelled water, E-O-U-S, Waterous. Yeah, and there's an unbroken one up in the
Okay.
display cabinet, but, yeah, so they used to bottle the.
And what, would he drag with it, or was it
Yeah.
so they drink it? Not,
And marketed and shipped here, there and everywhere.
yeah.
But the bottling was taken down around about 1917. And Garrett, the editor, the owner editor of the newspaper, they used to use that word for his cottage.
Oh.
So I don't know if Pura Salts was bottling anything, I don't know if they ever made anything. But, sorry.
Okay, so we'll move on to the change room door.
Hi. It's nice to see so many faces here today. Thanks for coming. So before I get into the research of this change room door, I'm going to read a letter for you, or to you. There was a lady that came to Manitou Beach, and we call her Nurse Patterson. She and her husband were from Regina, but she came every summer, and she actually had a bathhouse. In 2001, the National Post ran an article on Manitou Beach. And in the article, they had interviewed they interviewed, give me his name, Arnold Struby. Yeah, and they also interviewed Alan and Yvonne Anderson and Bob Guest. And so in response to this National Post article, a lady by the name of Eileen Graves, she was a McCann, she wrote a letter directly to Arnold. And then Nurse Patterson's daughter wrote a letter directly to the reporter that ran the article. And so I thought, just of interest to get started, I'd read the letter that kind of gives us a snapshot of the day in the life of Nurse Patterson and that part of Manitou Beach. So the news article was titled "The Magic of Manitou Beach," and again, it ran in the National Post in August of 2001. So this is Kay McMichael, who was a Patterson. Nurse Patterson was her mom. And she says, "Dear Roy McGregor, recently I received your well-written article on the magic of Manitou Beach and felt compelled to write and express the hope that Arnold Struby's dream does come true in his lifetime." The article was published in the National Post. "My mother, Nurse Jean Patterson, operated a nursing home and bathhouse called Glenicalls." Did I say that right, Lionel? Glenicalls, which was situated on the shore at McLaughlin's Beach, next door to the Round Dance Hall and roller skating rink, from 1929 until she died June 10th of 1949, but only in the summer months in July and August. "My mother was a well-qualified nurse with 9 years of training in Scotland, during which she had taken many patients over to Carlsbad, Germany. She married my father in 1917 and lived on a farm at Wilmer near Arcola, Saskatchewan, but moved to Regina a few years later. In 1926, she heard of Manitou Lake and rented a cottage for 2 weeks from Charlie Gallagher, who incidentally ran a bathhouse. Of course, she recognized the value of the mineral water, and 3 years later had her own establishment with 4 bathrooms, a rest area, and 3 bedrooms for invalids who stayed with us on board and room basis, plus a small cottage. I and my brother were put to work, keeping the pump running to get the salt water up into a cold tank, which then supplied the hot tank, which we had to keep hot by throwing in poplar tree trunks into the furnace. Oh yes, we washed the towels, dried them, folded them too, plus washed out each bathtub after each patient with Dettol, even though we knew that Manitou water was the best disinfecting solution. Mother had dreams of an all-year-long destination for people with arthritis, rheumatism, with first-class accommodations. Taking in money during 2 months per year didn't allow for much to paint their homes and live the rest of the year. We had to go home to Regina for the children's schooling, so joined Dad there in September. Mr. Struby should have given you pictures of how the salt is thrown up on the shore and the mineral oil comes to the surface of the water just before freeze up so it can be harvested and bottled. Fine mud produces facials. Any person who swims across the lake and back knows that there are hot springs evident. When the lake water lowered in the late 1937-39 years, my mother advocated clearing out some of the springs that were plugged with a concentration of salt, clearing by dynamiting areas of the lake. As teenagers, some good divers could bring up chunks of salt, like chunks of ice from deep water. In Carlsbad, Germany, the springs were kept clear, hence had a continuous flow of water. Manitou Lake is far superior. Carlsbad had springs that were circled with concrete, and arthritic patients were lowered into the mineral waters for 20 or so minutes per treatment. There were royal commissions in 1939 with one biology professor asking questions like, "Who did you cure and what did you cure them?" were ridiculous. She was very busy giving 200 hot baths per day and never asked their addresses, but many would come back year after year. From the time I was 10 years old until I was married at 24 years, I spent the summer holidays at Glen Oak Hills and loved helping people. Two people I well remember. A 35-year-old man asked Mom for advice to get rid of his scabs and open sores, psoriasis or eczema he had. He was living in a tent away from everybody, for no one wanted to be near him. He came at 5 a.m. for a hot bath each day, but during the day and night, whenever he felt itchy, Mom suggested he jump in the lake and swim until he felt better. 2 weeks later, a gentleman in a smart suit appeared to pay his bill. His skin was clear and smooth, a happy man. Mr. Turner was a railroad engineer from Regina. He had arthritis very badly and had spent a month and a half at Radium Hot Springs, Fairmont Hot Springs in the USA, but these places hadn't helped. He stayed with us. Dad would lift him under his armpits and I would carry his legs to get him to a hot bath each morning and evening. After 3.5 weeks, he left us, eager to get back to work. Maybe the long rest helped, but Mr. Turner gave credit to the Manitou water working its miracle. Thousands of people could be helped by the government of Saskatchewan if the government of Saskatchewan or Canada would develop a year-round resort. People not ill could enjoy winter sports like tobogganing, cross-country skiing in winter, golf in summer, as well as hiking. I was delighted the big hotel and large swimming pool built recently are successful. Millionaires or movie stars who can promote spas around the whole 28 plus miles of shoreline are a dream, but some governments or wealthy could help. Thank you, Arnold Struby, for keeping Danceland where it belongs. I applaud the National Post for publishing Roy McGregor's article. Wouldn't it be wonderful if those who were helped by the healing waters were to write you and discredit the doctors' royal commissions? Sincerely, Kay McMichael. And then she mentions Elmer Treble, who lived on a farm at the south end of the lake, now lives in Watrous, can verify who I am, because I know his sister Edith. And then another PS, I know the mineral water was a dreadful taste and reaction, and the salt left on the skin after swimming is usually washed off is a nuisance. And if you have a cut or a scratch, the water will nip or sting, but cure it. And then I always thought that I was a good swimmer because I could swim or dog paddle across the lake and back. But in later teens, found I couldn't swim or keep my head above water in another half. Just north of Kimberley, we have Radium Hot Springs and Fairmont, but neither have the same minerals or quality of water as Manitou Lake. So that was kind of fun to receive that.
Talking about its healing power, I was never really a human healed up cuts and whatnot. But when I had Scott Cabins, there was a family that come, I believe they were from Alberta, but in the motorhome, and they had just come back from the Mayo Clinic. And they had a son about 12 years old, and he literally was bleeding from, I guess it was eczema. And the Mayo Clinic told him that he just had to grow out of it. He couldn't do anything for him. But they'd heard about Manitou Lake somewhere along the way, so they stopped and they stayed at Scott Cabins. And he went in, and 5 days later, he it was just all healed, but it looked like he'd maybe been in a fire, you know, but he had no bleeding at all.
Yeah.
And they took him back a bunch of water and salt with them.
And I bet they kept coming back.
Well, I imagine so, I
Yeah.
never saw them again, but just in those few days, he healed right up.
Patty, I knew Nurse Patterson. And you may remember, they had two children, Kay and Taylor. And you may remember, those of you who watched football, Taylor Patterson was the referee. And that was our Taylor.
Oh.
Yeah. And she used to do hundreds a day.
Yeah.
People coming in for a bath, they drained the water, and all they had was a little, I remember it as a garden hose, about that big, into the lake. And they had a little pump right there, and the building was where the motel was that was torn down right along the edge, that's where the building was. And Glen Opals was pretty fancy. She kept it really neat and clean, and the two kids were, at that time, Taylor turned to be a bit of a hellion, but only when I was with him probably, but. Anyways, when they came, that said July and August, but indeed she usually came somewhere just after the middle of June. And then she shut down on Labor Day when everything else shut down.
Yeah.
It was like it was the end of the world, boom.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Like when I grew up, when September long weekend came, like it was bustling because it was the last weekend. And then the next day, I felt like it was almost like a loss, like a grieving, because then it was nobody. Things were boarded up, it was done. Could hardly wait till the next day.
Lionel, what, didn't Ben and Jackie Clark take it over?
Yes.
Yeah.
They had it for a
They
number
ran.
of years, I don't know
Yeah.
if they offered bats or.
Yeah.
Bats
Yeah, they
or
did.
strappers.
Yeah.
Ended up being more of a motel.
They also, I was gonna say, they also introduced the idea of renting rooms,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
whereas Nurse Patterson never did that. People didn't stay there, they came in for that. At least I don't recall anybody staying. One of the other things that, can I just interject one more
Sure.
story?
Yeah.
One of the other things that people don't realize is the healing power. Everybody talks about the healing power, but it really is there. And I think back to about the second or third year that we opened the spa. And I was managing at that time. And a fellow came to the front one Sunday, and I remember because there were, 200 or 300 people at least in there. And he came and he said, I need to talk to the manager. And that was me, so I talked to him, and he said, I need to go in the water, but I don't think you want me in there. And so we talked, and he said, well, I want to show you my leg. So he showed me the calf of his leg. He's a big man. And I could have put my fist in the hole in his leg, and it was just raw meat. And I said, oh. And he said, if I go in there, everybody else is going to get out. And I said, that's right, you're not going in there. So I took him down to what we have is, what was the boiler room then, I think it's still the boiler room in the building. And we had a 5-gallon pail. I filled it with hot water, and he stripped off his pants and sat there, and I said, you gotta put your leg in the pail. Toughest man in the world. He just put it in there, and he went, and he just hung on, and he never said a word. He just got red, because the pain must have been unreal, because it was just, pieces of flesh were floating up in the water. And he sat in there long enough that I came back and emptied out the pail. And by the way, I emptied in the sewer, and as far as I know, his flesh is still up there. I filled another pail of water, and he put it back in, only this time he just put in. The singing was over. And he put that in there. Next Sunday, guess who was there again? Same guy. And I said, absolutely, took him back, gave him a pail, put his foot in. He wasn't there the third Sunday, but he was the fourth Sunday. And he came in and I said, you ready for the pail again? And he said, no, I don't need that. And he pulled up his pant, and there was a big cavity in his leg, but it was all healed over. And he had told me when he came up, he said, if this isn't cured in a week, they're taking my leg off. And I said, I don't know whether this will cure you or not, but we're gonna find out. And presumably it did, and he never saw him again. He was an Aboriginal fellow.
That's great.
He was tough.
Thanks, Lyle. Yeah, Rod?
I just got a note to add to it all, seeing that Lionel voiced about the Aboriginals. My mother grew up in the town of Nokomis, but she lived right along the rail line. She said, all of a sudden there'd be natives in the yard with a team of horses and a wagon, looking for water, because water's, and away from Nokomis had good water. So they'd take on fresh water, and she'd find out, where are you folks going? We're going to the Lake of the Healing Waters. So that was back in the early 30s.
Yeah.
They still conveyed over this way for the Healing Waters. So relates back to the Aboriginals and how true, how many years before that did they come, who knows? But that was their goal, to be the Lake Manitou. So just, a thought that was so true to the history of that lake.
Yeah. And where we got the name?
Yeah,
how
took
it
it up.
was named.
Since we're talking about water, when you, in Europe, there's such a strong tradition for mineral water. And what is classified as medicinal water, it requires to have 1 gram of minerals per liter of water. And that is medicinal. So many of the spas, you will see an analysis of what is in the water. And in Europe, people understand what iodine is used for, what sulfur is used for, what magnesium is used for. And you go to a very specific spa for what you need. And here, we have over 300 grams of minerals. I've been to the Dead Sea. It is, you're floating, you are on the water. Manitou Lake, you are on the water. I swim every day in that lake. It is magic, because what we have that so few water sources have is such a high magnesium content. It's the magnesium that is so therapeutic and healing for skin. It's hydroscopic with a lot of other stuff. So, but it is magnesium that is really great in that one.
So much value in there.
Just an addendum to that, I've been in Carlsbad.
Yeah, so,
We've
me
been
too,
there. Yeah.
I've been to a lot of
And
spots.
folks come up and you can have a glass of water.
But Carlsbad has maybe 10 grams per minerals per liter. It's not very strong.
No, it isn't, but, and as you go there, and the fellow gives you the glass and all those things, and he says, now, this is really difficult to drink. So I took a drink of it, and it's not a hell of a lot worse than what we drink sometimes. So I said, well, it's nothing. It's nothing. And I remember the guy, and so I said, where I come from, the lake is water that's salty and strong and so forth. And he disregarded me perfectly. I was just gonna tell you one more little story about Taylor.
All right.
Yeah, Taylor was he a little bit older than me, but only a little bit, and we summed around quite a bit together. And, when Taylor was probably, the drinking habits were a little different in those days. Nowadays, you can go in just about anywhere and get a drink if that's what you want. In those days, not so. And that's why I was going to mention when we were talking about the jail. As far as I know, the only residents ever in that jail were not major criminals. They were just a little drunk. Otherwise, you know, there might have been something, but I don't know. Taylor liked his beer. And you couldn't buy half dozens and 2 bottles of cans or anything. It was just a bottle of beer. And Taylor would buy a dozen beer. And I must tell you that when we golfed, it was always difficult because Taylor's bag was very heavy. By the time we got to the end of the round of golf, it was very light. He would drink a whole dozen beer on that round. I was far too young to drink beer, and I never do now either. Well, hardly. Anyways,
Careful now.
I must, yeah. Anyways, I must tell you something about Nurse Patterson. Anyways, one day, I went over there and Taylor would be 16, 17, 18, I'd be about 14, 15. And he was in big trouble because he had bought a dozen beer and Nurse Patterson did not like that particularly. So he had a dozen beer and he had them all squirreled away outside the cabin and covered with leaves to keep it cool and so forth. And she found them.
Oh.
And she had a great hullabaloo and threw those out, and whatever customer that was that had those, and she threw them all out, and Taylor was heartbroken.
There they went.
Yeah.
All
Sorry.
right.
But
Thanks,
another
Lionel.
thing, beer was only $3.20 a dozen.
Yeah, but he didn't make much money either, you know.
All right, so we'll focus now on the change room door and a little bit about what we know about the door. So it's solid wood, it's likely fir, it's not been painted, but you'll see on part of it, you can see some white paint speckle. The one side has a brass doorknob with the typed out paper instructions glued to the door that would have been on the inside where the graffiti is. The opposite side has the brass door and latch. And it's got the silver or aluminum number 16 that doesn't, it's different than the brass knob and latch. Neither the latch nor the knob lock. There appears to be evidence of water damage to the bottom of the door. And the instructions are partly tore off, but what we can read is that somebody else will be using this room. Leave it tidy. Take your suit and towel and leave it in the box provided at the passageway. Patients are requested. And something about in the cuspidors provided. So it's like a spittoon in there as
Spit
well.
in the dust.
So although the title is tore off of the sticker, you can see the very bottom of what would have been the title, and I can kind of see 2 words that maybe were a LAS, and then the next word had like a K or an R, or it could be EAS with an R or a K. I tried to research the different names of the bathhouses that we could come up with, but those letters don't really line up, so I don't know what that title was.
East Room.
Pardon me?
East Room.
Oh. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Or last room, LAS. I don't know. So 3 ladies have signed the inside of the door. So the first name is Billy May. It was signed August 8th of either, it's hard to read the year, 1909 or 1929, I'm not sure, and she was from Saskatoon. And then another name is Miss Billy Chapman from August 18th of 1927 from Vancouver. And I do wonder if they're the same people that maybe came back, I don't know. This one was Billy May and then Miss Billy Chapman. But the name that we can read best is Louise Gill. And it's not the Louise Gill that we know. It's not like Lori Gill and Roy and it's not their mom. It would be their aunt. So Louise's husband, Gill, it would be his sister, Louise Gill. So Diane Richardson is Louise's daughter and said that her parents were married in 1946. So we're presuming she would have changed her name to her married name in 46, meaning she signed the door prior to 46. Louise was from Renown and would go to the lake for the day with family, but likely would not have stayed in a hotel or paid for a bath. So that's a bit of a clue. So what we know about the bathhouse hotels and timelines, and we're featuring them on the slideshow. 1910, J.J. McLaughlin set up 2. Johnson's Sanatorium also came, and Brown's Bathhouse. Josiah Martin's Tourist Hotel had rooms, hot baths, and treatments. Whitmore Hotel in the Mauritania. Is that how you say it?
Mauritania?
Mauritania. 22, Markham's Hostel came up with rooms and baths. White's Pool was up and running from 22 to about 53. From 27 to 56, we had the Hiawatha Lodge and the Tourist Hotel that provided treatments, baths, muscle manipulation, and massage. Chalet Pool was open 1929 to 83, but probably not from there, it would have burned. 31 to 46, Glen Oakles and Patterson's Bathhouse ran. 47, or pre-47, Dr. Stites Manitou Clinic. And then there was also Frank's Loyal Bathhouse that then from 44 to 66 was Peter Pollock's, and then it became, I think, Manitou Beach Bathhouse by Elsie Mokner. So we,
Okay.
this door,
Yeah.
so this door came out of what was at one time a Burndall house. It was owned by Myron and Lillian Burndall. And when their son moved back to Watrous in the mid-40s, I think he probably moved into the house after his parents. And then he lived there until his death. And Myron Burndall's father was Tobias. Okay, so we could do a whole nother session on Tobias, but we won't do that. We do have a display upstairs of 3 of the 4 patents that he had gotten approved back in the day. So I spoke with Andy Broadfoot, who told me that the door was in the house when he purchased it from the Burndall estate in about 2004. It was in the basement. He said the house had been moved in from Renown, and I found out that Lillian was a Reed from Renown. So that may have been the Renown connection. I talked to David Reed, but he has no knowledge of the history of the house or the door there, because he would have been a cousin to Lillian. Yeah.
That house, I know exactly where it came from. It was just, his name, it was the Merkley House, Wilbur, I think, or Wilbur. He was a teacher at Highwood, and he had that quarter section that house was on. It was about a mile from our home.
Oh, okay.
And that house was moved in, it sat empty for years. There's people by the name of Schindel lived there for a while.
Like in Watrous when it was moved?
No, Renown.
Oh, okay,
Renown.
yeah.
It was, it'd be southwest of Renown, about 2 miles, 2.5, 3 miles southwest of Renown. And Myron Mill, I don't know, it's when they got married or shortly after, they moved that house to where it sits right now.
Mhm.
So that's where the house came from. If the
Yeah.
door was in the house then or not, I have no idea.
That's what we don't know.
Do you want to just mention which house, where it is in Watrous?
Oh, yes, so the house is now on,
6th Avenue East and
Third
Third
Street.
Street, right across from
Street.
the hospital
Yeah.
parking lot.
yeah, 6th and 3rd. It was painted like a peachy color for many years, and now it's a nice blue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, So we don't know when the door was added to the house, and not knowing the history of the house when it was in renown, which we now know, but I wasn't pursuing that because I was feeling like I was getting more about the history of the house than the door. So, so it was, the door was gifted to the Heritage Center during settlement of an estate, and it was recognized by the people as an item of interest to the Heritage Center. So they reached out, and of course, we were happy to accept it. So I'm gonna get into what I've ruled out and a bit about why. So Peter Pollock's bathhouse ran from 44 to 66, and it was previously Frank's Loyal bathhouse. But I spoke with Gordy Maynard, whose mom, Elsie Mokner, owned and operated it from about 66 to 73. But he said that there were only 6 doors and they were numbered 1 to 6. And they didn't have any brass doorknobs. He remembers that. Then the Glenocals and Patterson's bathhouse, built in 27. Lionel suggested if it was a well-constructed solid door, it maybe came from there because Miss Patterson, she was a classy lady and a business owner who likely had better doors with the brass and that kind of thing. And that's the building that was purchased by Clark's and later named the Holiday House. And I talked to Sandra and she said they didn't have 16 rooms. And then there was Markham's Therapeutic Hostel that was later Gravis's Swedish Massage. It was built in 1922. It could accommodate some 30 patients. The door has a number 16 on it, so. And Markham's offered both baths and rooms. I reached out to Dwight Hayter, but he doesn't know anything about the doors being taken out when the building was torn down for the spa parking lot. But I was able to get a hold of Linda Gravis, who's now Linda Nemirsky. And she had looked through old photos and things after I had sent her a picture of it. And she just couldn't find any information of the door. She felt like it looked familiar to her, but we really don't know why a door would have been removed from that building unless when it was torn down, but it with it dating pre-46, yeah, we're not sure there. I spoke with Sandra Clark and she suggested the Little Manitou Provincial Park buildings that are now Camp Easter Seal. Because she felt that the door is the same as many doors of the cottages that were built within the provincial park at the time. And we know that the chalet at like what is now Camp Easter Seal had 16 rooms and 15 cabins in 1931. But the history book makes no mention of a swimming pool or suggesting that they laundered for guests. Even though after it became Camp Easter Seal, then they had the freshwater pool with the common change room area. But that, again, the signature of the door predates the early 50s when it became Camp Easter Seal. So I don't know, Lillian, if you remember anything about this?
No.
No.
I never got to go 59, so.
Oh, okay.
When we didn't pay much attention, it's there.
Okay. And then I thought of the YWCA, because if there were, you know, people coming and staying and swimming and stuff, but Prairie Reflections doesn't mention anything that would give us a hint that they had changing rooms, and we don't know whether they had rooms or not, or how many. So the possibilities are, it sounds to me like the door was somewhere where you would be provided with rented both bathing suits and towels. And that the door was a change room to a common area where there would be girls. So White's Pool, Prairie Reflections tells us that White's Pool had 98 dressing rooms and a laundry department that looked after bathing suits and towels that were rented. Lionel told me there was no connection between White's and Burndall's, where the house it came out of, and that his father's own workers, including himself, tore it down. They stacked the materials and they sold it, but the doors weren't numbered. And we, we understand that somebody bought all the doors for a granary. That said, did White's Pools rent bathing suits and towels the same as the chalet? I don't know, do you know? You would know. Did they?
Sure they did.
Okay,
Yes, they
yeah,
did.
they did.
As
Okay.
I recall, the doors in the change room, Lionel can speak to, they were not nearly as fancy as that.
Okay.
No, I'm
Mostly they
sure
were
you
about
never.
that thick.
Well, and I wondered, is it possible that one of those would have ended up in this Burndall house, so
Well,
maybe not. And then I thought of the Manitou Lake Health Clinic and Humans Clinic, 1947, I think is when Humans took it. It was previously the, yes, hotel and the Whitmore hotels. They had two side by side, 19 to about 1926. The Whitmore hotels offered 34 modern equipped rooms with electric lights and dining room service. Of interest is that after it was purchased in 1947, the Humans continued to renovate the hotel to include a dining room, modern and semi-modern rooms, a bath section, a doctor's office, and a physiotherapy room. In 1967, there was a flood that ruined the main part of the building, and that part was demolished, and there were no more inpatient quarters or mineral baths. So I wonder, when the bath section was added, were the numbers on the door added during the reno in 47? Is that why they're different than the brass handle and knob? And then with the water damage being at the bottom of the door from the flood in 67? Could have been a water damage in a house too.
I wouldn't put a lot of faith in the numbers, if I were you, because people have been
throws
known
us
to
off.
expand their business by just changing the numbers on the door. And so, you know, you gotta realize that there were half a dozen places offering that. And they advertised and they tried to attract people to come and bathe in their place and so forth. And so they would have 52 rooms. Well, there were 2 and 5.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't put a lot of faith in the numbers.
there was a hotel across from Danceland in that area. But it
Oh,
burned
yeah.
down, so I don't expect there was any
I
doors.
was there when it burnt, and it
Right.
burnt
Yeah,
like
I
rocks.
remember
Yeah.
it being there, it was, but
Yeah.
unless they salvaged something out of it, that's a possibility.
Salvage beer.
Well,
Taylor's Highway beer across the street. No.
so I'll just wrap it up. Although I've narrowed down the possibilities and ruled out some other buildings, all the information may not be accurate. We rely on the memories and presume facts in prior reflections. So some information helps us to rule out certain establishments, leaving a few possibilities, but we may never know. Anyone who has firsthand knowledge or memories, again, please share. And have a look at the door, both sides and both of them. It's kind of fun to, it was fun to research it, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
And by the way, his name is Peter Paluk.
Paluk,
Paluk, he was Polish. Quite Polish.
P-A-W-L-U-K.
Paluk.
the other daughters.
You have
Yes.
Remember the daughters.
Steffi, she was popular because in a lot of the pictures and stuff that we went through,
should have.
Steffi was in a lot of
He
them.
was there all the time.
Yes.
And she mentioned
Yes.
her remember that name.
Sand it down?
Yes,
Didn't
I
touch
heard
it.
that.
It's a
Yeah,
cool name.
I didn't
I
realize.
assume she's
All the
gone
years
by
we were
now.
down there, I never remember seeing it.
Nope.
Garage. She was over now.
On the fourth side there. Yeah.
Huh?
Here.